Well, welcome everyone. My name is Roger Whitmer. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Collin Corporate College, and we're delighted that you've joined us this morning for our webinar. We have a very interesting topic, very interesting guest this morning, and the title of our webinar is New Leader Assimilation, and our guest is Sanjeeb Samanta, and we are delighted to have him with us, and he brings a wealth of experience. Some of you have joined us in the past and you know kind of what our format is, but for those who are new to this webinar, just to share with you that we'll do an interview for 15 or 20 minutes or so. We'll give Sanjeeb a chance just to give some general advice to the audience, and then we'll take a live Q&A. So as we go through the 30-minute webinar, if you have questions, please throw them into the chat, and then we'll get to those at the end of the session. And depending upon how many questions there are, we may run over a little bit of our time, but we want to get to all those questions. So I'm going to jump right into it. And Sanjeeb, if you don't mind, you have a very interesting and dynamic bio. And rather than me kind of reading through it, I just thought, if you don't mind, would you kind of share with us your background and your experience? And I know you're a principal for Praxis Solutions International now. Maybe share a little bit with us about what that looks like, then we'll jump into some questions.
Sure. First, thank you for having me this morning. From a background standpoint, my career has been focused on organizations and how do you get the best out of an organization? And that could be in helping an organization or being part of it and leading it. And so from that, as I started Praxis, the focus Praxis has is really in two different areas. One is in organization transformation. The other one is in digital transformation. And under organization transformation, it really helps different organizations and companies around things that are related to people, to process, to the governance or business rules, those elements. So you think about things like shared services, outsourcing, process improvements, new leader assimilation. Under digital marketing or digital transformation, you have things like digital marketing, helping an organization transition from classroom to e-learning, those aspects. So in a nutshell, and there's a lot more information, and it'll be on my website, praxissolutions.us.
And the bulk of your career was with Texas Instruments, is that correct?
Yes. So most recently, the last 25 years has been with Texas Instruments, and prior to that, I was with IBM, Pricewaterhouse, and Technip. And I've had the privilege of working in 3 continents. So each experience I've had, I've learned a lot from, and my organization experience has really not just come from knowledge acquired, but also knowledge experienced.
Very good. Again, we're delighted to have you. I'm just going to jump into the first question. So the topic, right, new leader assimilation, what is that exactly? And really, what are the drivers or the triggers that cause an organization to recognize, we need to focus on this assimilation? And maybe another aspect of that question is how does it get initiated within an organization?
Sure. So the first thing is just to clarify, because this is a very large space, right? So just to clarify the topic for at least the scope for today's session is when we are talking about new leader assimilation, we are not talking about someone who is a new manager or a new leadership role and trying to get them engaged or effective. Today's topic is really more around a leader who is come into an organization as a new leader, and how do we help him or her be very quickly and very effectively embraced within the organization. And here, the 2 words of quickly and effectively are the operative words, right? And also the fact about embraced. Because embraced has, if you think of the word, it automatically tells you it's not just about what you are doing, it's about how people are receiving you, right? That's very critical. So think about an organization or any kind of change that happens in an organization. Most often, when there is a change in leadership, for example, people have different kinds of emotions. And often there are concerns, there are issues that arise from this kind of a change. Some of the most common issues are, for example, during such a change, there's a state of ambiguity, right? That is driven by lack of sufficient and immediate information. And again, the two operative words are sufficient and immediate. And I'm not saying timely, I'm saying immediate, because often when there's a change as leaders, let's say I'm coming into an organization, I'm driving a change, I'm just coming into an organization, because there's so much to deal with, thinking about the people and the organization and how quickly do I get to them, oftentimes is lower in my list. And therefore, that need or the lack of that drives ambiguity, right? Number two, during such a phenomenon of a change, having a new leader, there is a weakening of trust. And that is driven by information. So it's either not enough information or information is inconsistent. Inconsistency, and none of this are necessarily driven by intentional negative behaviors, right? This is just outcomes. And then the third piece is as groups go through these kinds of change, there's also, if you don't have enough information, there's ambiguity, your trust is starting to weaken, then self-preservation becomes a dominant factor, right? And so people start to look out for themselves. So those would be some of the problems that such a change, and what a new leader assimilation does is if you consciously come in and do a new leader assimilation, it helps you avoid or address some of these challenges.
Very good. So it sounds like there's actually a process here.
Correct.
Right? And so can you talk us through what that process looks like?
Sure. So as I look at the process, I would say I'd break it up into three pieces: the what, the how, and the who. So let me start with the who. Oftentimes, again, in the rush of being in the mode of business and you don't have time to take a step back and really look at things, you are in a drive mode. Oftentimes the tendency is, let me go figure out what needs to be done and I will do it. So the first thing about this is in the who, this process is effectively and successfully done if it's not you, the leader, that's doing it. You need someone from the outside, as an external to you, external to your organization, to help facilitate this process. Okay? Let's look at the what. So most often when you look at the new leader assimilation process, most often people talk about it as a 5-step process. I like to look at it as a 6-step process where I introduce step 1. So step 1 is really to identify your audience. So when you come in as a leader, depending on the situation, and everything is situational, identifying who needs to be part of this assimilation process is very important. I would say the most important stakeholder in this, or the audience, is your employees, the new team or the new organization. So identifying who you're going to work with in this process. Number 2 is a data collection process. So here's where the facilitator would spend time with people in your organization. So let's pretend the audience is the organization. So the facilitator would spend time with the organization as a step 2 to understand what is on their mind and collect that. And that's called a data collection step. The next thing then is the facilitator comes, and this is over a period of time. The facilitator then comes and sits with the leader, the new leader, and shares the insights, the feedback, the observations he or she has had through the data collection process and shares that with the new leader. The next step then is the new leader goes away, takes time to process what he or she heard, and then puts together a response. And then the next step is where then a meeting or a session is scheduled, where the new leader now comes, joins the organization, and talks through the different things that came out of data collection, addresses them, and then also has discussions around it, right? And then the last step is to continue to do the feedback, just to continue to stay in the pulse of the organization. And then the second piece, we talked about the what and we talked about the who, is the how. And oftentimes, if you've chosen the right facilitator, he or she can help guide you on how you should go about doing this. There is no one way to go through this exercise. It'll depend on the situation and what are the more sensitive areas versus not.
So talk a little bit more about the facilitator. Why is it so important for that person to come from the outside?
So when I say outside, let me just clarify, it need not be outside your company, right? It has to be someone who is objective. Because remember, this exercise is all about establishing trust and getting to know the new leader. So if for any reason, what I would call the environment is not safe, then the content, you'll never get to a safe place with the content. I consider the facilitator as part of the environment, right? So if he or she is seen in any way to be tied to or known by the facilitator, having some kind of a relationship, the perception often is that objectivity is lost. So anything I share during this data collection, I'm going to be tagged to that feedback to the new leader, and that's a breach of trust.
Right, so there's the danger.
Yes.
So again, we talked a little bit about your background and all the experience you've had. So it's, from our discussion prior to today, it sounds like you went through a situation which was high risk and very sensitive. So I'd love for you to share with us today kind of that experience and how it worked for you and what made it successful.
Sure. So in one of my roles, I had come into an organization, and let me just give you the backdrop real quick. So I came into an organization, a large organization, where the leader, my predecessor in that organization, had been was being replaced by me, however, was still going to stay in the organization. Two, the leader, from a performance management standpoint, oftentimes we think the people we manage know if there's a problem or not, but we've done a poor job of communicating what expectations are, etc. So in this case, the individual was not very clear there was a problem, right? So you have a leader who did not know there was a problem, was then replaced, continued in the organization. The organization, he was very well liked by the organization. He was technically or subject matter wise very sound for that organization. And then I came into this organization from a different group, so I wasn't even part of this group, so no one knew me, even though we were in the same company. So that's the backdrop. And so when I came into this organization, because I had led my company's global OD and change management, I had helped businesses through a new leader assimilation. So when I came into this role, I didn't have to wait for HR, which is where normally such guidance comes from. I knew that I was going to do a new leader assimilation. I knew I needed to consult or get the assistance of an external facilitator. So all of that were things I knew because I had done it. And then as I talked through these 6 steps that I talked about, when I assessed the situation based on the backdrop and a few other elements, what I needed to do, my primary objective was how quickly can I help the organization get to know me and get to start to trust me, right? Because it wasn't that they didn't trust me, it was the fact that the person who was their leader for a long time had been replaced. So there was a lot of human dynamics, right? So what I did was, this comes to the how that I talked about earlier, situational. In my case, I altered the how. When normally you go through these 6 steps over a period of time, I decided that if I'm going to establish trust and if I'm going to try to get this quickly and get embraced quickly, I decided to pull a lot of these steps into the same day. So basically what I did was I prepped with the facilitator, the consultant. She was very clear on what my objectives were. So, and the way we did it was, and this was a very big organization, so we broke it up into 3 groups, each of the managers' teams. And so she did the session in the morning with the whole group in a room, did the data collection, heard all the themes, whatever was on their mind, whatever they wanted to hear about me or learn about me, etc. And then what I had done was I had told her, okay, once you're done with that step, text me. I'm going to come in and just cold with no preparation, no time to reflect on what people are thinking, etc. She was going to call me, I was going to come into the room, and then she was just going to go through the different things people pointed out, and I was going to respond and basically real time talk to what was on people's minds, right? It was very risky, right? As you can tell, it's very risky. It's you're literally on the spot. You have no idea what to expect, etc., etc. However, what I want, I know who I am, right? But they don't. And I needed them to know who I am. So by taking this approach, I was able to get to a level of engagement and comfort with the organization that I would not have gotten if I didn't take this approach, right? And then as we went through this, the discussions, it started to validate the how that I had taken for this. For example, as I started to see different things that people had raised in the morning session, right? Because at this point, everything is anonymous. So as I looked at it, there were perceptions around the fact that I was there to outsource the team or the organization.
Interesting.
And then when you start to pick through the why is this perception there, right? Basically, I had led 3 of the company's most successful outsourcing efforts. And so somewhere in some system somewhere, my name was tied to outsourcing.
You're the outsourcing guy.
Yes.
Right.
So when change happens, people try to get as much information. If you're not giving them the information, they're looking for it, right? So they saw it somewhere, and so that was one perception. Second perception was the fact that I didn't care about the team, and that perception came from the fact that I wasn't from that domain or subject matter, right? I had never been anywhere close to that domain or subject matter. Another perception was the vice president, the person who headed up the organization. It just so happened that perceivably he was from the same culture I was ethnically, right? And so again, people just thought the VP brought in his friend, right? So there's all these different elements, and we are humans, and we all think along these lines, right? The engagement or the session where, as I got those without preparation, I was able to talk to each of those, right? So let's take, for example, the the perception that I didn't care because I didn't have subject matter expertise. That was my 10th role in that company, right? And so I had the opportunity to tell them, okay, so let's look at my career track in this company. Every place that I've come and played leadership roles, it was with no content expertise, because that I surround myself with the content experts. The skill I bring is a part of the equation. You guys are going to bring the other part, right? And so as you start to have the conversation, that is the rich part, right, of this whole exercise.
So in real time, you're correcting the misperceptions,
Absolutely.
the misinformation.
Absolutely.
Right?
And again, as human beings, not everyone takes what they hear and just believes it. But there's also an element of, as you look, you start to assess, is this authentic or not, right?
Sure.
So without trying to be something I wasn't, I was just intellectually addressing this, taking this approach of the how, but it was very effective in what I was trying to achieve with my organization. And so as you fast forward, and as I looked back in 6 months, then as people started to know me, then I got feedback as, hey, when we did this session, when you said this, it meant this to me, right? So coming back to something I said earlier, the how quickly can you effectively get the leader embraced? The quick happened right there in those sessions, right?
Right. Very good. So, there's kind of this artificial date or time put on new leaders. It's like the first 90 days and the importance of that first 90 days, or the importance of quick wins, or the low-hanging fruit we talk about. Can you just speak to any of that makes sense in this process?
Sure.
Is that 90 days a real time, or is it just artificial?
Sure. I think the first X, 90 or less, I would say the movement is more towards less, with the whole digital and
Sure.
the whole surround sound being digital, right? But the first X days is, in my opinion, is very necessary, right? For a few reasons. One is the moment I come in as a leader, and if my new boss, even if it's a vice president, a CEO, wherever you are, the moment you're told, hey, can you share your first X day plan? That in itself forces urgency in my mind, right? And it's not just about the deliverable, but it starts to force me to put together what goes into that first X plan. Secondly, once you have the first draft of that, then comes the conversation, right? And then I'm sitting with whoever to share my plan. And that's where then the next level of value comes in, which is you have certain assumptions or perspective. You put your plan together, and then when you start to talk, then you realize, oh, this is higher priority, this is not, etc. So some of the adjustments happen, right? All of that is very valuable at the end of the day to the organization. So one is crystallizing the plan, whatever the first X is. By the plan drives urgency. The plan also, just through the discussion, surfaces things you may not have thought about, heard about, learned about. And of course, then, once you have a plan, you have to execute to it. It holds you accountable, right? So I'm sure there are people in the spectrum of what their point of view is, but that's mine.
Very good, thank you. And just a reminder to the audience, if you have questions for Sanjeeb, I hope you're sharing those in the chat, and we'll try to get to those in just a minute. But I would love to give you, Sanjeeb, a chance just to give any general advice, anything that you feel like this audience might benefit from in terms of your experience.
Sure. So I would say, clearly you could see that I value a new leader assimilation process, right? So I would say, if I have to just summarize a few things. Number one, I would say, do it consciously. Don't let it just happen. Do it consciously. Number two, own it, drive it, because it benefits you the most. Third, as a leader, when I look through my leadership lens, in anything I do, in any environment I'm playing the role of a leader, for me, there's three buckets. There's the bucket of self, there's a bucket of others, and there's the bucket of work. So as you prepare for your new leader assimilation, think very carefully about self. What is it I want to know? What is it people want to know about me? Think about others. What do I want to know about the organization, the people? What do I already know about the organization, that our people, that I would like to validate? And then the third, the work, which is the vision, the strategy, and all the elements that drive the business side of it, right? So as you prepare, keep those three things in mind. Number 4 is be authentic. There is no perfect way to do this, and there is no perfect person. So just be authentic. Maybe you are a highly, extremely intense leader. Maybe that's your reputation. This is not the place to adjust that if you choose to adjust it, right? If you are intense, that's who you are. Being authentic is using the process to understand, I am an intense leader. How can I best work for you? How can I best help you, right? That is being authentic. The next is follow up. You do your new leader assimilation, then life happens, you get into the execution of things and business starts to roll. Take time, 6 months, 9 months, do a pulse. Make sure your pulse of what you think is happening and how things are going is aligned with how people see it, right? And then the last one I would say is choose your facilitator wisely.
So if I could, I'd like to ask
Sure.
a follow-up on that
Sure.
one, because it just seems like that facilitator is imperative in the process, and finding that objectivity you spoke of. So how do you find that? Well, you said it's the leader that's making that choice. I mean, what does that process entail?
Sure. So, and I use the term facilitator without, I realize by using that term might be doing injustice to the real skill set of this person, right? Because sometimes when you see a consultant, that in itself has other connotations. But really, this person is a specialist in working with people, or this person has key skills in managing people in a process, right? So the kinds of things this individual brings is, one is he or she is able to listen to information and be able to parse it out, right? Parse things, pull themes from a conversation. So let's say, for example, you are doing a new leader assimilation, you're all in a room, your facilitators in the room, the consultant, right? A good consultant, so let's say the people are giving feedback, and I've given some feedback about this new leader. I give the feedback and then I look at my colleague Roger. A good facilitator can pick up on that. And then as they go through the process, they're going to come back and somehow try to understand, what was that look about? Because is there valid data that needs to be collected to help the leader fix, adjust, or react, right? That's the level of the human dynamic that a really strong OD background kind of person brings, right? To me, that would be the kinds of intangible. The other thing is your facilitator, the person you choose, should be able to push back on you. Because as a leader, you come in and oftentimes we are not always at our humble best. So we think, this is how we're going to do it. Right. That person comes in with a different view. He or she is the expert. So he or she should be able to tell you, hey, Sanjeeb, I suggest you pull this all together. What I did for myself, I played the role for myself here. The facilitator needs to be able to do that and help the leader where he or she doesn't have that expertise.
Very good. Thank you so much. So let me just check. Do we have any questions that have come in that we need to address? Here's one. It says, who is the primary stakeholder that starts the process? The new leader or someone in the...
Good question.
Okay.
So I would say, and to my closing statement, right? I would say don't wait. Own it, drive it. You as the new leader, drive it. Because if you wait, sure, if your organization is mature and if you have such a process in your company or organization, your HR manager might come to you, they might allocate someone to you, or your boss might tell you. But remember, all of that happens as part of someone else's job. This is the primary part of your new job. So I would say own it, drive it. Don't wait for someone.
Very good. Any other questions, or is that all we have right now? Okay, good. So let me just share with the audience that if you do have additional questions for Sanjeeb, or if you're interested in learning more about leadership training and what we offer at Collin Corporate College, I would hope that you would connect with us at our website, and it'll be on the screen momentarily, but it's collin.edu/corporate college. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to help you address any gaps at your organization in terms of leadership or others. We have subject matter experts that we have access to, like Sanjeeb, that are able to help and certainly enjoy those opportunities. So thank you for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next month.